During dinner, my sister said she was pregnant and that the father is my husband. But then, I revealed a secret. You know when you think you know the people closest to you? When you believe that no matter what problems you have, there are certain lines that would never be crossed. Well, I thought so, too. My name is Morgan. I'm 29 years old, and this is the story of how I discovered that some people are capable of anything to get what they want. It was a Thursday in March when I got the news of my promotion. After 4 years of grinding as a project manager at a tech company in Austin, Texas, I was finally being made commercial director. I couldn't stop smiling all day at the office. I called David, my husband, and Brooke, my younger sister, to share the joy. Let's celebrate at Vetri tonight, I suggested. Vetri was that chic Italian restaurant where a single meal cost more than a week's minimum wage. But I could afford it. I had worked hard for this. I arrived at the restaurant first, wearing the navy blue dress David always said looked perfect on me. I chose a table in a more secluded corner. I wanted privacy for our celebration. The dining room was buzzing with executives and elegant couples, the kind of environment where I had started to feel comfortable after years of building my career. When I saw them arriving together, I found it strange. Brooke was radiant, wearing a smile I hadn't seen on her in a long time. David just seemed nervous. He always got a little uncomfortable in expensive places, but there was something different that night. A tension in the air I couldn't quite identify. Congratulations on the promotion, Morg, Brooke said, hugging me with an overly enthusiastic warmth that felt suspicious. She was never very demonstrative with her affection, especially not with me. We ordered a $200 bottle of Napa Cabernet, and I launched into telling them about the new projects I would be leading, the 40% salary increase, the possibilities for international growth. Brooke listened with a little too much attention. David just kept fidgeting with his napkin. Actually, Brooke interrupted, right in the middle of my excitement, we have some news to share, too. She took David's hand across the table, and my stomach twisted into a knot. I'm pregnant. The world stopped. Literally. The chatter of the restaurant faded to a distant buzz. The lights seemed to flicker. I stared at my sister's hand intertwined with my husband's as if it were a mirage. Pregnant. Brooke was pregnant with David's child. I know it's a complicated situation, David spoke for the first time since they arrived, his voice cracking. But it happened, and we fell in love. They watched me with a mixture of apprehension and poorly disguised satisfaction. It was as if they were waiting for me to explode, to scream, to make a scene that would give the other table something interesting to talk about later. But I couldn't do anything but stare. My sister, Brooke, whose college tuition I had helped pay when our parents couldn't, was sitting there holding my husband's hand, pregnant with his child, telling me this on the day of my greatest professional achievement. How long? I managed to ask, my voice coming out strangely calm. 3 months, Brooke replied, her hand stroking her still flat stomach. It started right after your birthday. My birthday had been in December. It was now March. 3 months of betrayal. 3 months of lies. 3 months of them laughing behind my back while I worked 12-hour days to get this promotion, the very one I was so excited to share with the 2 people I thought I loved most. Morgan, say something, David pleaded. For the first time in years, I really looked at him, really paid attention to the men I had been married to for 4 years. He looked relieved, as if a great weight had been lifted from his shoulders, as if this confession was liberating for him. What do you want me to say? I asked, still in that strange, detached voice that didn't feel like mine. Brooke let out a nervous, but genuine, laugh. Look, Morg, I know it's not easy, but these things happen. Love is love, right? And the baby. She ran her hand over her belly again. The baby needs both its parents together. I slowly picked up my purse, left 2 $50 bills on the table, more than enough to cover my share, and stood up. I'm going home. You two do whatever you want. As I walked toward the exit, I heard David calling my name, but I didn't turn around. In the large mirror on the restaurant wall, I could see their reflections still sitting at the table. Brooke was smiling. Throughout our childhood, Brooke lived in my shadow, and it irritated her to no end. I was the older daughter, the responsible one, the one who got good grades without having to try very hard. She was the youngest, the spoiled one, the one our parents shielded from everything. But for some reason, that was never enough for her. We grew up in a middle-class family in San Antonio. Our father worked as an accountant for an oil company, and our mother was an elementary school teacher. We weren't rich, but we never lacked for anything. Even so, Brooke always acted as if she deserved more. When I got a full scholarship to study business at the University of Texas, Brooke made sure to say it was just rich girl luck. When I graduated with honors and landed an internship at a multinational in Austin, she commented that I always knew how to sell myself. When I bought my first apartment at 25, she asked if I wasn't being a little too ambitious. The worst part is that she genuinely believed she deserved the same things I had, but without putting in any of the effort, as if success were a matter of luck or favoritism, not hard work and sacrifice. Brooke studied graphic design at a state university, graduated without much distinction, and had been jumping from one freelance gig to another ever since, always complaining that her clients didn't recognize her potential. Our parents always tried to balance things out. When I bought my new Honda Civic, they bought a used one for her. When I started earning a good salary, they increased the allowance they gave her to help with her rent on a small apartment in downtown San Antonio. It was as if they were trying to compensate for my success by artificially keeping Brooke at the same level. She was always asking about my salary, my investments, the value of my apartment. Just sisterly curiosity, she'd say. But there was an intensity in her questions that always bothered me. Now I understood. It wasn't curiosity, it was pure, unadulterated envy mixed with a greed I had refused to see. When I met David at a work party 5 years ago, Brooke made sure to tell me he wasn't my type. He was handsome and charming, working as a salesman at a BMW dealership. He earned a decent living by Texas standards, about $5,000 a month with commissions, but it was nothing compared to my $8,000 salary, which soon became $12,000. Still, I fell in love. He was fun and affectionate, he made me laugh after stressful days at the office. David had a simplicity that I found attractive, an uncomplicated way of looking at life that contrasted with my nature of always planning 3 steps ahead. Brooke was always polite to David, but I noticed a certain tension, especially when we all went out together and the bill arrived. David sometimes felt embarrassed when I paid for dinners that cost $100 per person or when we bought concert tickets for $200 each. Brooke observed all of this with that calculating look I knew so well but had always chosen to ignore. "You basically support him, don't you?" she asked me once when David went to the restroom during a family lunch at Olive Garden. "I don't support him," I replied, irritated. "We split things proportionally to our incomes." It was true. David paid for what he could, groceries, gas, some household bills, and I covered the rest. It worked for us. But for Brooke, it was just more proof that I had all the luck, a brilliant career, a beautiful 2-bedroom apartment in Austin, a dedicated husband, investments that grew month by month. As if I hadn't fought for every single achievement, as if it had all just fallen from the sky. I got home, and the apartment was exactly as I had left it that morning. The bed was made, the dishes were washed, and everything was in its place. It was strange how your life could completely fall apart while your surroundings remained exactly the same. David's toothbrush was still in the holder in the bathroom, his clothes were in the closet, and that ridiculous Dallas Cowboys mug he'd gotten from a dealership promotion was on the counter. I sat on the beige leather sofa in the living room, still in my dress and high heels, and just stared into space. My head was strangely quiet, as if my brain had shut down its emotion processing system. I knew I should be crying, screaming, breaking things, but all I felt was a kind of numbness, like when you hit your elbow and your arm goes dead for a few minutes. David didn't come home that night, obviously. At 2 a.m., I received a text. "I'm at Brooks. We'll talk tomorrow." Brooks. He called my sister Brooke as if they'd been intimate for years. As if I didn't exist. As if our 4 years of marriage were just an inconvenient obstacle that had finally been removed. I spent the night awake, pacing the 1,300 square feet of my apartment, trying to understand how I had ended up here. How had I not noticed the signs? Were there signs? David working late more often in recent weeks. Brooke asking about my schedule every time she called. The two of them arriving at the restaurant together as if it were the most natural thing in the world. Now that I thought about it, Brooke had been visiting Austin a lot in recent months. Came to see some clients, she'd say. She worked as a freelance graphic designer, so it was plausible she had projects in the city, but Austin was only an hour and a half from San Antonio. Why did she always stay in hotels? Why hadn't she asked to sleep on my couch like she used to? When the sun rose, I was still on the sofa, my dress wrinkled and my makeup smeared. My iPhone showed 17 missed calls from my mother. Brooke had already told her everything, probably in a romanticized version where she and David were star-crossed lovers who couldn't resist the cruel fate that brought them together through me. I called the office and said I wouldn't be coming in. My assistant, Simone, could tell from the tone of my voice that something was seriously wrong, but she didn't press. "Call me if you need anything, Morgan. You never miss work. It must be something important." She was one of the few people I could trust completely. I went to take a shower, trying to wash away the sticky feeling of the previous night. Under the hot water, I finally cried. Not dramatic, movie-style tears, but the quiet, tired crying of someone who had just lost two of the most important people in their life at once. My sister and my husband. The two people I loved most in the world had betrayed me in the cruelest way imaginable. When I got out of the shower, I had 3 new messages from Brooke. "Morg, we need to talk. It wasn't how we wanted you to find out. Call me, please. I know this is difficult, but we can resolve this like adults." I deleted them all without responding. For the first time in years, I spent the entire day doing absolutely nothing productive. I binge-watched Netflix, ordered $40 worth of Chinese food that arrived cold, and ignored the phone that rang every couple of hours. It was as if I needed a whole day to process the fact that my life had completely changed overnight. That evening, David showed up to get some clothes. He still had his keys. He still felt entitled to walk into the apartment I had bought on my own as if nothing had happened. He tried to talk, to explain, to justify himself while he packed a suitcase. It wasn't planned, Morgan. It just happened. As if betrayal were a weather event, something beyond human control. Brooke was going through a difficult time. She needed someone to talk to. "How long have you been together?" I asked, watching him fold the polo shirts I had bought for him at Nordstrom. "Officially. Since January. 4 months. 4 months of lies, of fake kisses, of empty I love yous before we went to sleep. While I was working 60 hours a week to get a promotion, dreaming of our future together. He was building a new life with my sister. I'm going to find a lawyer," I warned, sitting on the king-sized bed I had bought the year before. David stopped packing and looked at me for the first time since he'd arrived. "Morgan, it doesn't have to be like this. We can resolve everything between us, civilly. Divide things fairly, without complications. Civilly. Divide things fairly." As if betrayal were an issue that could be resolved with politeness and goodwill. As if he had any right to what I had built. After he left, taking 2 suitcases and promising to come back for the rest on the weekend, I called Helen, my best friend from college and now a family law attorney in Houston. I told her everything, trying to keep my voice steady. Helen listened in silence, and when I finished, she sighed deeply. "Morgan, I am so sorry. I know how much you loved him and trusted your sister." She paused. "About the divorce, I need you to bring me all the documents, marriage certificate, bank statements, property deeds, proof of income, investment portfolios, everything. I'll build the best possible case for you." "Helen, I don't care about the money. I just want this to be over quickly." "Don't say that, Morgan. You fought hard to build what you have. You're not just going to hand it over to the men who betrayed you. Do you have any idea how much your assets are worth today?" I didn't have an exact figure, but I knew it was substantial. The apartment was worth at least $400,000. I had about $100,000 in investments, a stake in a startup worth at least $50,000, plus the new salary of $16,000 a month. I scheduled a meeting for the following week and hung up. That's when I remembered I needed to organize all the important documents. It wasn't something I did regularly. Who thinks about divorce when they're happily married? I went to the office I had set up in the second bedroom, where I kept everything organized in colored folders like a person obsessed with control. Bank statements from the last 2 years. Tax returns. Investment statements from Fidelity and Charles Schwab. It was impressive to see on paper everything I had achieved by 29. I was proud of what I had built, but now it all seemed so fragile, as if it could disappear because of a betrayal and a poorly handled divorce. I picked up the green folder where I kept our marriage documents. Birth certificates, marriage certificate from Travis County, contract for. I stopped, the marriage certificate in my hand, frowning. There was something written there about the property regime that suddenly caught my eye. Separate property regime. Complete separation of assets. Why complete separation? Most couples in Texas chose community property. That's when I remembered, vaguely, like a memory stored in a dusty drawer of my brain. A prenuptial agreement. I had insisted on getting a prenuptial agreement 4 years ago. I ran to the small safe I had installed in the bedroom closet. It had been so long since I'd opened it that I almost forgot the combination, my birthday, inverted. Inside, between the deed to the apartment and my passport, there it was, a sealed envelope with the official stamp of the Travis County Clerk's office. Prenuptial agreement, Morgan Santos and David Miller. My hands trembled as I opened the envelope. I vaguely remembered insisting on this at the time, but the details were hazy. It had been 4 years ago. I was so in love and happy that the legal aspects of marriage seemed like just a necessary formality to make our love official. But now, alone in my bedroom at 2 a.m, holding those pages printed on law firm letterhead, I felt something I hadn't experienced in days, a glimmer of hope. Maybe, just maybe, I wouldn't lose everything I had built. Maybe there was something in those papers that could protect me from my sister's greed and my husband's irresponsibility. I took a deep breath, turned on the bedside lamp, and began to read every single word with the attention of someone deciphering their own future. The memory came back like a movie being rewound. It was a sunny Saturday in April, 2 weeks before our wedding. I was 25 and had just signed the purchase contract for my first apartment. A modern 2-bedroom loft in downtown Austin that cost $350,000. David was nervous about the wedding preparations, complaining about the costs that were getting out of control. "Morgan, are you sure we need all this?" he had said, looking at the vendor list spread across my kitchen table. $15,000 for catering, $8,000 for a photographer, $12,000 for decorations. It's a lot of money. A lot. It was a lot of money, especially for him, who was earning about $4,000 a month at the BMW dealership. For me, having just received a substantial promotion and now earning $12,000 a month, it was an investment in our special day. But I understood his concern. He had grown up in a family where every dollar was counted. "David, relax. I'll pay for most of it. You contribute what you can. What's important is that we're together, celebrating our love." It was in this context that I first mentioned the prenuptial agreement, not out of mistrust, but as a natural protection for someone who was already accumulating significant assets. My lawyer at the time, Patricia Williams, ESQ, had suggested it during the apartment purchase. "Morgan, you're young, successful, and building wealth rapidly. A prenup is just sensible, especially when there's a significant difference in assets between spouses. It's not about mistrust, it's about intelligent protection." When I brought it up with David on a Tuesday night, he laughed. Literally laughed, almost spitting out the Shiner Bock he was drinking. "A prenup? Isn't that for rich people? We love each other, Morgan. Love doesn't need a piece of paper to prove anything. That's for couples who get married already thinking about divorce. It's not about love, David. It's legal protection for both of us. If something goes wrong..." "Nothing will go wrong," he interrupted, pulling my hand. "We're going to be happy forever. You're being paranoid, babe." He made a face like he didn't understand the necessity, but he eventually agreed when I explained it was something that would make me feel more comfortable. "If it's important to you, then fine. But honestly, I think you're complicating something that should be simple." We went to Ms. Williams's office on a Thursday morning. I remember David was hungover. He'd gone out with his colleagues from the dealership the night before for a last bachelor outing. He arrived 15 minutes late, looking sleepy and complaining that he'd lost an important sale because of our appointment. "Sorry, Morgan," he'd said. "Had to come straight here. Johnson wanted to close a deal today, but I told him I had an important appointment with you." Ms. Williams, an elegant woman in her 50s with silver hair and an impeccable suit, explained the basic terms with the patience of someone who had given this presentation hundreds of times. Complete separation of assets. Each spouse maintains their individual property. No division in case of divorce, except for assets acquired jointly with clear proof of mutual contribution. It's important to understand, she said, looking mainly at David, that this agreement protects both parties. If you acquire significant assets during the marriage, they will also be protected. You understand, David? I asked, observing his somewhat lost expression. Yeah. Everyone keeps what's theirs, right? Makes sense. It made no sense at all that he could have understood completely, because David never showed any interest in complex legal or financial matters. Whenever I tried to talk about investments or financial planning, he'd change the subject or joke about me being too uptight with money. But he signed all 15 pages of dense legal text with the ease of someone signing a grocery receipt. There were specific clauses about properties, investments, future businesses, inheritances. David barely read the section titles. Now you can get married in peace, Ms. Williams said, smiling as she stamped and filed the copies. I hope to never see you here in a professional capacity again. On the way back, as I drove my Honda Civic through the streets of Austin, David commented, I still think this whole contract thing is kind of weird. But if it makes you feel better, what's important is that in 2 weeks, we'll be married. Husband and wife, forever. He truly didn't understand what he had signed. For David, it was just another piece of bureaucracy to make our love official, like getting the marriage license or choosing the rings. He didn't comprehend that he was signing away any right to my present and future wealth. And I, so in love and confident that we would be happy forever, didn't mind his lack of attention to detail. After all, love was more important than any piece of paper, wasn't it? We were going to build a life together, share everything, be a modern, partnered couple. The contract was just a formality that would never be necessary. How wrong I was. Now, 4 years later, alone in my bedroom at 3 a.m. with that contract in my hands, I finally understood the value of that rich people nonsense. I read each page with renewed attention, as if I were deciphering a secret code that could save my life. The legal words that had once seemed like mere formality now shone on the page like precious diamonds. Complete separation of property. Each spouse shall maintain individual ownership of all property owned prior to the marriage and all property acquired during the marriage. Acquired during the marriage. The apartment I bought before we married. The investments I made monthly from my salary. The stock options. The stake in the tech startup I'd bought 2 years ago. All of it was exclusively mine. In the event of dissolution of marriage, there shall be no division of property, with each party retaining the entirety of their individual assets. David had no right to anything. Absolutely nothing of what I had built. I kept reading, searching for any clause that could complicate things, some loophole he could use to claim a part of my estate, but there wasn't one. The contract was crystal clear, comprehensive, and bulletproof. Ms. Williams had done impeccable work. Spousal support waiver. Both parties hereby waive any right to spousal support, alimony, or maintenance from the other party. Alimony. David didn't even have a right to alimony. And considering he earned so much less than me, he would theoretically be the one who could ask for financial support. For the first time in 3 days, I smiled. A small smile, but a genuine one. David had signed his own financial death sentence 4 years ago without even realizing it. And Brooke. Oh, Brooke. She had probably seduced my husband thinking he would be her ticket to a financially comfortable life. The irony was delicious. I continued reading the specific clauses. Separation of debts, each responsible for their own. Future businesses, corporate stakes remained individual. Intellectual property, royalties, patents, not shared. Inheritances, assets received from family remained with the original recipient. It was a complete suit of armor. David had no right to a single cent of what I had built, and more importantly, I had no responsibility for his debts. I remembered he had financed a Ford F-150 the year before and had a high-limit credit card that he used frequently. I grabbed my laptop and started making a list of my current assets. Apartment valued at $400,000. Investments in stocks and funds totaling about $100,000. Stake in the startup worth at least $50,000. Checking and savings accounts with $40,000. Paid off car valued at $20,000. Over $600,000 in net worth at 29. And my new salary as commercial director would be $16,000 a month, plus performance bonuses that could push it to $20,000 in the best quarters. Meanwhile, David would continue earning his $4,000 or $5,000 a month selling cars. The plan they had cooked up was now clear. I remembered a conversation last Christmas when Brooke complained about the injustice of me having everything. "Morgan, do you realize how frustrating it is? Beautiful apartment, new car, trips, while I'm killing myself working and can barely pay rent." Now I understood it wasn't frustration, it was reconnaissance. Brooke had seen David as an opportunity to finally get what she felt she deserved without having to work for it. She didn't love him. She loved what she thought he could give her access to. I stored the contract back in the safe, but not before taking photos of all the pages with my iPhone. I emailed the images to Helen with the subject line, "An act of God." She responded in 15 minutes, even though it was almost 4 in the morning. "Morgan, this changes everything. Call me tomorrow." For the first time since that horrible dinner at Vetri, I was able to sleep for a few hours. And for the first time in a long time, I dreamed about my future. A future where I was completely free to be whoever I wanted, without anyone trying to steal what I had built. The next morning, I woke up with a mental clarity I hadn't felt in days. As I sipped coffee in my modern kitchen, looking out the 10th floor window at the Austin skyline, I began connecting dots that had once seemed like innocent coincidences. Brooke had always shown a suspicious interest in my financial life. It wasn't just sisterly curiosity, there was a calculating intensity to her questions that now made perfect sense. "How much is the mortgage on this place?" she had asked during a visit last year. When I explained I had made a large down payment and was paying it off aggressively, her eyes lit up. "Wow, it must be worth a fortune." She asked about my salary with uncommon frequency. "Morg, how much are you earning now?" "Just so I can get a sense of the market," she'd say, as if she were comparing her freelance rates. When I mentioned I was investing in stocks, she wanted to know specific amounts. "I'm thinking about starting to invest, too. I need a frame of reference." The most painful part was realizing they had planned that entire spectacle at the restaurant. The choice of Vetri on the night of my promotion. The way they arrived together. The poorly disguised satisfaction on their faces. It wasn't an impulse or a desperate confession, it was theater. They wanted to humiliate me publicly, to catch me off guard and watch me fall apart. They probably expected me to react with desperation, begging David to come back, offering him anything to save my marriage. Too bad for them they didn't know about the prenup. I spent the weekend organizing my strategy. I called Helen first thing Monday morning. "Morgan, that contract is a work of legal art," she said. "David has absolutely no right to anything. We can have this divorce processed in 60 days if he doesn't contest." "And if he does contest? On what grounds?" "He signed the prenup. Everything is registered. There was no coercion or fraud. He's screwed. Utterly screwed. David was screwed, and he didn't even know it yet." "Helen, I want to do something," I said. "I'm going to call them and propose a civilized conversation about the divorce. I want to see their faces when they find out the truth." "Morgan, are you sure? It might be simpler to just file and be done with it." "I'm sure," I said. "They humiliated me in public. I want to return the favor." 3 weeks passed. David came by to get the rest of his things, always accompanied by Brooke, as if he needed her for moral support. My mother called daily, trying to mediate, talking about the baby and how these things happen. She, too, clearly believed David was entitled to half of everything. Brooke had likely been poisoning the well, painting me as selfish for not graciously accepting my own public cuckolding. In the 4th week, I called Brooke. She answered on the 2nd ring. "Morg. I'm so glad you called. We really need to talk." "Hi, Brooke," I said, my voice even. "Look, I've thought a lot about this whole situation, and I think you guys are right. There's no point in holding a grudge. We're adults. These things happen." There was a stunned silence on the other end of the line. She was not expecting this. "Really? You're okay with this?" "I'm trying to be. I mean, you fell in love, right? And now there's the baby to think about." "Wow, Morg. You can't imagine how relieved I am to hear you say that. David was so worried you were going to make a huge drama out of this, complicate the divorce. Complicate the divorce. How interesting. As if I were the problem. Not at all, I said smoothly. Can we meet to talk about how to resolve everything without fighting? Just settle things like adults. Maybe dinner again. This time for closure, not for surprises. Brooke laughed nervously. Of course. That would be great. David will be so happy. Perfect. Let's meet at Vetri again, since that's where it all started. Saturday night. Perfect. Morg, you have no idea how important this is for us, especially with the baby coming. I hung up the phone, a slow smile spreading across my face. Saturday night was going to be very, very interesting. I spent the next few days preparing like an actress rehearsing for the performance of her life. I chose my outfit, an elegant black dress that conveyed seriousness and control. I practiced a calm, resigned expression in the mirror. On Saturday, I arrived at Vetri punctually at 8 p.m. and asked for the same secluded table. David and Brooke arrived together again, but this time, the atmosphere was completely different. They were relaxed, smiling, holding hands like a couple in love who could finally be seen in public. Brooke wore a dress that highlighted her small but now noticeable baby bump. Morgan, David said, pulling out a chair for Brooke. Thank you for agreeing to talk like this, peacefully. We ordered the same expensive Cabernet as last time. The irony was thick, but this time the mood was one of celebration. They thought they had won the lottery. So, David said after the first sip of wine, about the divorce. We were hoping to do everything amicably. Just divide things fairly, without any complications. Divide things fairly, I repeated, savoring the words. Tell me more about that, David. What do you consider fair? He and Brooke exchanged a quick, rehearsed glance. Well, David began, we can sell the apartment and split it 50-50ths. The investments, too. And with your new promotion, a little alimony would really help until I can get stabilized with Brooke and the baby. Alimony. He really believed I was going to pay him alimony while he raised a child with my sister. I slowly reached for my purse. They watched me expectantly, probably thinking I was about to produce some divorce papers for a friendly signing. Instead, I placed the old, courthouse-sealed envelope containing the prenuptial agreement on the table. The yellowed paper made a dry sound against the wood. Before we talk about dividing anything, I said, I need to clarify something important that you two seem to have forgotten. David frowned at the envelope. What is that? Our prenuptial agreement, David. Remember? The one you signed 4 years ago, calling it rich people nonsense. The color drained from his face. Brooke looked from him to me, confused. What agreement? You have a prenup. We do, I said, taking the pages out and spreading them on the table so they could both see. And David signed it without really reading it. It's called complete separation of assets. Do you remember what that means? David grabbed the pages, his hands trembling. His eyes scanned the lines, trying to process words he clearly hadn't understood 4 years ago. Calm down, Morgan, Brooke said, her voice losing its confidence. Even with an agreement, you were married. There's community property, division of assets acquired during the marriage. Not when there's a complete separation of assets, Brooke, I said, pointing to the specific clause. It's right here. Each spouse shall maintain individual ownership of all property owned prior to the marriage and all property acquired during the marriage. Everything acquired during our marriage stays with the person who acquired it. This can't be legal. David protested, his voice rising. The apartment, the investments. I lived there. I contributed to expenses. You contributed $300 a month for groceries and gas, David. I paid the $1,800 mortgage, the condo fees, the internet, the electricity, the insurance. Your contribution doesn't give you property rights over a $400,000 apartment. Brooke was now frantically flipping through the pages, searching for a loophole. But alimony. He has a right to alimony. I smiled. Page 5, Section 3. Spousal support waiver. Both parties waive any right to spousal support. David signed away his right to alimony when he signed this. I didn't know what I was signing. David shouted, drawing glances from nearby tables. You tricked me. I tricked you. David, you were sitting right there when the lawyer explained every clause. You said you understood. There are witnesses. It's all registered with the county. The expression on Brooke's face was morphing from confusion to sheer horror as reality hit her like a runaway train. You mean, he gets nothing? Nothing. Zero. Zilch, I said, putting the papers back in the envelope. David leaves this marriage exactly as he entered it, with his financed pickup truck, his clothes, and his credit card debt. Oh my God, Morgan, David pleaded, his face ashen. You can't just leave me with nothing. I'm going to have a child to support. You are going to have a child to support, I emphasized. With your car salesman salary. Which, by the way, will be pretty tight after child support. Child support. Brooke whispered. Of course. The father has to pay. In Texas, it's typically 20% of net income for one child. If David makes $5,000 gross, that's about $3,800 net. 20% of that is $760 a month. Every month, until the child turns 18. They looked at each other in panic. They clearly had not done this math. Plus medical expenses, daycare, clothes, education, I added pleasantly. It's going to be quite expensive having a baby, guys. Morgan, how can you be so cold? David whispered, sinking into his chair. So calculating. Calculating. Me. I leaned forward. You two planned this betrayal for months. You humiliated me in this very restaurant. And I'm the calculating one. Brooke was clearly doing the math in her head. David's take-home pay minus child support, her own meager freelance income, a baby. So, I continued, you'll be living on about $5,400 a month, best case scenario, for 3 people. Where will you live? In your 1-bedroom apartment in San Antonio, Brooke. It's going to be pretty cramped with a baby, don't you think? The silence at the table was deafening. Morgan, David tried one last time, his voice breaking. Are you really going to do this? We hurt you, I know, but... You didn't just hurt me, David. You tried to rob me. You thought I was some emotional idiot who would hand over half of her $600,000 estate just because you were in love. $600,000? Brooke repeated, incredulous. Surprise. I'm even richer than you imagined. And with the promotion, I'll be earning $16,000 a month while you two are fighting over money for diapers. David buried his face in his hands. I'm an idiot. A complete idiot. Finally, I said, something we can agree on. Morgan, you're my sister, Brooke pleaded, tears welling in her eyes. You can't just abandon us. What about your niece or nephew? Don't you want to help? Brooke, you tried to steal my husband because you thought you'd steal my fortune along with him. You miscalculated. And now, you'll have to live with the consequences of your choices. But, we're family. Family doesn't betray family. Family doesn't humiliate family in public. Family doesn't seduce their sister's husband out of greed. I stood up and placed 2 $50 bills on the table, again, more than enough for my share. Your lawyers can contact mine. Her name is Helen Williams, in Houston. She has all the necessary information. Morgan, wait, David said, standing to follow me. No, David, you waited. You waited 3 months to tell me the truth. You waited for the day of my promotion to maximize the humiliation. Now, it's my turn to make you wait. Wait for what? Brooke cried. I paused at the door and looked back at them, huddled together in their shared disaster. Wait to see what it's like to be poor. What it's like to count every penny. What it's like to not be able to afford dinner at a restaurant like this. I left them there, hearing Brooke begin to sob as David cursed under his breath. In the parking lot, sitting in my car, I allowed myself a moment of pure, unadulterated satisfaction. They had tried to destroy me, and in the end, they had only destroyed themselves. My phone rang. It was Helen. So, she asked, how was the theater? Better than Broadway, I said. You should have seen their faces. Morgan, you're diabolical, she laughed. And I completely approve. Helen, I asked, a genuine smile in my voice for the first time in weeks, can you file for divorce tomorrow? I can file the papers Monday morning, she replied. In 60 days, you'll be free, and they'll still be poor. I drove home smiling, actually smiling more than I had in years. 6 months later, life had settled into a new normal. The divorce was finalized in exactly 60 days. David didn't contest, any competent lawyer would have told him he didn't have a chance. I officially became single on a sunny July morning. Through social media and my mother's inevitable commentary, I followed David and Brooke's unfolding reality from a distance. It was like watching a car crash in slow motion. David's commissions at BMW plummeted with the unstable economy. According to my mom, his income dropped to around $3,500 a month. He's really struggling, Morgan, my mother would say. After the child support, there's very little left. What a shame, I'd reply, with no sympathy whatsoever. He should have thought of that before. Their daughter, Sophia, was born in September. The $800 monthly child support was deducted directly from David's paycheck. Brooke and the baby had to move back in with our retired parents in San Antonio, as they couldn't afford their own place. David, unable to get a transfer, was now making the 3-hour round-trip commute from Austin every day, spending a fortune on gas. Meanwhile, my life had spectacularly taken off. Freed from the dead weight of their betrayal, my energy was boundless. As commercial director, I shattered all my first quarter targets, securing the maximum bonus. My monthly income sometimes hit $22,000. The startup I was a partner in got a new round of funding, tripling the value of my shares. My net worth soared past $1 million. At 30, I sold my old apartment for a huge profit and bought a stunning 2-story loft downtown for $700,000 cash, renovating it into a smart home masterpiece that was featured in Austin Home and Design magazine. I traveled to Europe in first class, shopped without looking at prices, and started therapy, not for sadness, but for growth. My therapist, Dr. Chen, helped me realize something crucial. Morgan, she said one day, you've spent your life believing you had to take care of everyone. Your sister, your parents, your ex-husband. When was the last time someone took care of you? I had always been the provider, the responsible one. It was time to put myself first. Brooke started sending messages, first pleading for reconciliation, then directly asking for money for Sophia. I read them all and then blocked her number. My mother tried to intervene. The child is innocent, Morgan. Mom, I said, my voice firm, when Brooke decided to seduce my husband, she made a choice. It's not my responsibility to solve the financial problems they created for themselves. Eventually, my father called. David had lost his job. My parents were struggling to support 3 adults and a baby on their limited retirement income. For the first time, I felt a pang of genuine guilt for my parents. I agreed to help them directly, paying their utility bills or buying groceries, but I made it clear, I would not give a single dollar to David or Brooke. They ended up moving into a trailer park in San Antonio. David found a new job at a smaller dealership for half his old salary. They fought constantly about money. 2 years after the betrayal, my life was transformed. I was dating a wonderful man, Daniel, a successful architect who was my true partner. He valued me for who I was, not for what I had. On the 3rd anniversary of that fateful dinner, I received a text from an unknown number. It was David. Morgan, I know you don't want to talk to me, but I need to tell you something. You were right. About everything. About me, about Brooke, about the money. I was an idiot and I destroyed the best thing that ever happened to me. I hope you're happy. Reading it brought me no anger, no satisfaction, just a sense of peaceful closure. He finally understood, but it was far too late. I deleted the message without responding. Today, at 32, I look back and see that horrible night at Vetri as the best gift life could have ever given me. It forced me to discover my own strength. I am now the executive director of my company, with an annual salary of $300,000 and a net worth over $2 million. I have a healthy, loving relationship. David and Brooke are still living in that trailer park, still fighting about money they don't have. Sometimes I wonder if I should feel guilty for having so much while they have so little. But then I remember. They tried to rob me. They planned my humiliation. They calculated my emotional and financial destruction. The fact that they calculated wrong is not my fault. I learned that self-esteem is non-negotiable, that not all family deserves loyalty, and that sometimes, the best revenge is simply to live an extraordinary life, while those who tried to harm you reap the consequences of their own choices. My story isn't about revenge. It's about justice. And it's about discovering that when you stop supporting people who only exploit you, you have so much more energy left to build something truly magnificent for yourself.